It was pitch black outside, the kind of dark that feels heavy and cold, when I woke to a violent pounding on my front door. I stumbled out of bed, my heart instantly racing. I knew that sound. It wasn't a friendly knock, it was a desperate, urgent signal. I pulled the door open to find my elderly neighbor, Mr. Alastair, standing on the porch. He was trembling inside his worn wool robe, his eyes wide and full of fear. He leaned in close and whispered, his voice thin and shaky. "It's starting. They're moving early." My breath hitched in my throat. I knew exactly who they were, the people who had stolen my life, my good name, and my family's inherited property. The months of quiet preparation I had done now felt like a wasted eternity. The time for action was here, right now. I rushed to the front window. Across the street, the abandoned property that my mother and father had left to me was suddenly lit up. The harsh glare of truck headlights cut through the gloom. I saw large moving vans and sleek, expensive black SUVs pulling into the driveway. It was the sickening sight of Quinton Vale's operation taking over. Quinton, my ex-boss, the man who ruined me, was finally making his final move to seize my inheritance. Shock quickly turned into a cold, hard rage inside my chest. The 6 months of careful, secret strategy were over. The sun was just starting to show on the horizon. At dawn, I made my final decision. Today was payback. If you're watching this, subscribe, like and let me know where you're watching from. The memory of that day always flashed back into my mind like a horrible, physical pain. It was 6 months ago, at the company's big annual shareholders meeting. Quinton stood on the stage, looking sad but important, and pointed right at me. He accused me of terrible things. Corporate fraud, stealing money, and betraying the company. They were all bold, sickening lies, but Quinton's performance was perfect, and the people believed him. I stood there, watching my entire future get shredded in front of a huge crowd of investors. My hands trembled, and my voice failed me. Quinton wasn't finished, though. He used the false debt repayment to legally seize my family's inherited land, the property my grandparents had worked their whole lives to protect. The total injustice of that theft felt like a deep, infected wound. Now, standing at my window, I watched those same smug investors arrive at the stolen property, laughing and shaking Quinton's hand. They were all guilty in my downfall, benefiting from his lies. I gripped the window sill until my knuckles were white and burning. I whispered the words, not a threat, but a promise of cold, clear retribution: "You'll wish you'd never touched me." I turned away from the window. It was time to stop watching and start doing. I walked quickly into my garage. It was no longer a place for cars. It was my command center, a silent sanctuary where I had prepared for this moment. The walls were covered with large maps, pinned with different colored strings that showed connections. Stacks of files were piled on a folding table next to a computer system that was humming loudly. I had been planning this moment for 6 long months, spending every night calculating every possible move. The map clearly showed Quinton's entire network, the crooked lawyers, the hidden bank accounts, and the fake companies he used to hide his stolen money. Every move I made was calculated, every step of his was predicted. Mr. Alastair stood quietly by the door, watching me with a worried expression. "Tony," the old man asked gently, "are you truly sure you want to do this? It could absolutely ruin you for good if you fail." I didn't stop typing the final codes on the keyboard. I looked up at him, my eyes steady and hard. I replied, my voice completely calm, "It's not revenge, Mr. Alastair. It's correction. I was fixing a massive wrong that had destroyed my entire life and my family's legacy." I found the file marked Final Protocol and opened it. The digital clock on my wall hit 5:45 a.m. The final countdown to noon, the planned time for Quinton's illegal auction, had officially begun. With the time ticking down fast, I made my first, and most critical, move. I opened a secure, anonymous connection on my highly customized laptop. I launched a perfectly timed series of emails. These were not simply angry accusations, they were whistleblower documents that held the absolute proof of Quinton's enormous corporate embezzlement, complete with bank statements, forged signatures, and voice recordings. I sent the large files to every major news outlet and financial watchdog group in the city. I watched the green confirmation receipts flash across my screen, signaling they had been successfully sent. A small, grim, satisfied smile touched my lips. The system was now starting to break down. The first step was complete, the truth was finally out there in the world. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the first surge of relief I'd experienced in half a year. But that feeling didn't last long. My phone suddenly vibrated on the desk with an incoming call from an unknown caller. I hesitated for only a second, then answered it. A low, smooth voice on the other end cut through the silence of the garage. It was Quinton. "Nice try, Tony," the voice said, full of cold, sickening amusement. My blood ran cold. I had been so careful to be anonymous, using 3 layers of encryption. How could he possibly know it was me? He knew. Panic instantly surged through my body as I heard the dial tone click. I knew that Quinton wasn't just calling to taunt me. As I looked back at my laptop screen, the horror started to unfold in real time. My highly encrypted drive, which held all the secret evidence, research, and backup files, was being attacked. Files started to rapidly disappear one by one, ruthlessly deleted by a professional hacker who was faster than I was. I slammed my laptop shut, feeling a sickening sense of invasion. This wasn't just a digital fight, it was a breach of my entire operation. I ran from the garage and into my bedroom, heading straight for the small, heavy safe I kept hidden behind a bookshelf. I quickly spun the combination, my hands shaking badly now. I yanked the steel door open. The safe was empty. My most critical physical evidence, the original contracts, the paper trail, and the old family deed, was gone. Someone had been in my house very recently. Then, a faint, sharp scent registered in my mind. It was a familiar, expensive, and sickly sweet odor, Quinton's cologne. He had already been here. The 5 a.m. knock from Mr. Alastair wasn't a warning of their arrival, it was a warning that Quinton had already left after cleaning me out. Feeling completely desperate and cornered, I knew I couldn't fight this unseen enemy alone anymore. I had no choice but to call in the biggest favor I had. I grabbed my secondary, completely untraceable phone and immediately called Celeste. Celeste was an old friend, a brilliant cybersecurity analyst who worked for a competing finance firm. Years ago, I had helped her escape a malicious lawsuit that Quinton had fabricated just to silence her. Celeste owed me a favor, and she was, without question, the best chance I had now to fight back. Celeste answered quickly and listened to my frantic, fast explanation. She remained incredibly calm and focused, which helped settle my nerves. She immediately agreed to help me. But before she started logging into my system, she gave me a very serious warning: "You're playing chess with a man who burns the board, Tony. You have to be extremely careful." Together, we started digging into the complicated traces of the recent hacks and breaches. Within only a few minutes, Celeste uncovered the devastating truth behind Quinton's early arrival this morning. Quinton had moved the illegal auction of my stolen land from the afternoon to noon, today. Celeste also found evidence of the auction's private, digital listing. The realization that I only had a few hours left hit me like a physical punch. The 5 a.m. warning from Mr. Alastair wasn't random. Quinton had moved the auction early on purpose to easily dodge legal oversight and any potential court orders or injunctions I might have filed. This was a direct, final challenge. Noon. Just 5 hours away now. My jaw tightened with fierce resolve. "Then I move early too," I declared, my voice hard and determined. I quickly directed Celeste to begin executing the final, most risky stage of my planned counterattack. Just at that moment, Mr. Alastair quietly reappeared at the garage door. The old man held out a plain manila envelope. "I thought you might need this, son," he said softly, his eyes full of concern. I took the envelope, my fingers tearing the paper in my desperate haste. Inside was a deed transfer, the original, legally binding document proving my family's ownership, the one that Quentin thought he had utterly destroyed months ago when he stole everything. Mr. Alastair had found it and kept it safe, knowing its importance. My ace, the hidden, final piece of evidence, had just miraculously resurfaced at the exact moment I thought I had lost everything. The final countdown was now live, and I had to move faster than ever. Celeste and I executed a daring digital maneuver. Celeste managed to infiltrate the auction's private live video feed system. This was the exclusive, high-quality feed being shown to the rich bidders in the tent at the stolen property. Celeste inserted a test feed, a dummy video file that would stream whatever I chose to send to it. I watched from my laptop as the live camera showed the polished, wealthy crowd, investors in their expensive suits, and right in the center, Quentin grinning, shaking hands and clearly basking in his premature triumph. A cold, deadly calm settled over me. I looked at Quentin's overconfident, cruel smile and whispered a warning to the screen, "Smile while you can." With a single, slow keystroke, I launched the prepared video file. On the silent stream only Celeste and I could see, a stark countdown timer began ticking down to the exact moment of the land sale. The video was secretly set to replace the auctioneer's screen with something no one expected: a devastating financial presentation of Quentin's fraud. Celeste had done her part perfectly. Now, the time for complete chaos had arrived. The first wave of chaos hit the auction tent precisely at 11:30 a.m. The calm, business-like atmosphere shattered instantly as phones across the room began to buzz wildly with news alerts. Major financial news organizations broke the story at the exact same time: Quentin Vale under investigation for corporate fraud and massive land theft. The headlines were everywhere, detailing the entire embezzlement scheme that I had exposed just hours before. The investors, instantly nervous, started whispering, then arguing, realizing their money was tied up with a suspected criminal. Quentin, standing confidently at the auction podium, looked up from his notes, and I watched his face drain of all color. He saw the chaos and the panic, but before I could celebrate the success of the leak, Celeste's voice cut through my headset. "Tony, the leak's been traced," she cried urgently. "Quentin's hacker is extremely good. The entire sequence, including the anonymous emails, was just traced directly back to your IP address." My attempt at anonymity was over. I was exposed. Across the live feed, Quentin stopped talking to an investor, looked right into the camera lens with a terrifying, knowing smile, and said clearly, "Nice to see you again, Tony." Within minutes of my exposure, the terrible, inevitable blow landed. Quentin's vast PR machine went into immediate overdrive. My identity as the whistleblower was everywhere on the news, but Quentin had completely twisted the truth. I was not painted as the hero, I was framed as the villain, a disgraced, crazy former employee who was supposedly trying to destroy his former mentor in a petty act of revenge. Public opinion, manipulated by Quentin's lies and money, turned sharply against me. The news reports shifted, painting me as a bitter liar and a potential criminal. Mr. Alastair watched the terrible news coverage on his small, antique television, completely helpless to stop it. Through the front window of my house, I could see it now: protesters hired, I knew, by Quentin's team, gathering outside my home, shouting angry slogans and waving malicious signs. I was trapped, cornered, and completely exposed. Quentin had taken everything from me 6 months ago, and now he was going for the final, finishing blow. I clenched my jaw tight. "He took everything once," I whispered, my eyes burning with a new, fierce determination. "He won't take it again." I felt the urgency rise in my chest. The true betrayal, I realized, began long, long ago, back in my parents' generation. I remembered my mother's dying words with perfect clarity. She was so frail, gripping my hand tightly in the hospital, and she had looked me straight in the eyes. Her final request was a desperate, chilling warning: never, ever trust Quinton Vale. I had dismissed it at the time, thinking she was just sick, but the pieces of the puzzle now clicked into place with a horrifying certainty. I remembered the old stories about her business dealings. I learned that Quinton had been my mother's business partner and, sickeningly, her secret lover. Their shared business deal was the original source of the land's ownership. My mother had foolishly trusted Quinton, giving him the perfect access he needed years later to steal the property from me. I felt a wave of icy sickness wash over me. The betrayal hadn't started with me, it had started long before I ever even knew Quinton. This was no longer just about my career or the land's title. The revenge had become deeply personal and was now a fight for generational justice. I was fighting not just for myself, but for my mother's betrayed memory and peace. I was no longer alone in this fight. Celeste was back online and furious. We worked feverishly, trying to dodge Quinton's cyber attacks while searching for a way to counter his powerful PR machine. Celeste, using her incredibly superior skills, started mapping the deep financial connections that I had completely missed. The embezzlement was too large, the hidden network too complex, for Quinton to manage alone. There had to be a silent investor, masked behind a wall of anonymous offshore accounts and fake digital fronts. Celeste eventually cracked a single name hidden deep within the structure of the shell companies. The name was Ingrid Sterling. I stared at the name on the screen, feeling a cold dread replacing my pure anger. Ingrid Sterling. She was, impossibly, my former mentor, the woman who had personally taught me everything I knew about business ethics and moral conduct in finance. Ingrid had always been a figure of immense respect and integrity in the industry. She was the one who lectured on transparency and warned me about greedy, heartless men like Quinton. The layer of betrayal deepened to an almost unbearable level. I realized my entire professional life was built on a foundation of lies. Ingrid was the true, silent mastermind. My entire plan had to immediately evolve to target the real queen of this dark game. I realized that I couldn't fight both Quinton and Ingrid out in the open, not now that I was exposed. I desperately needed to buy time and set a definitive trap. I made the difficult decision to pretend to surrender. I sent Quinton a final message through a trusted, third-party lawyer, who would hand over the only original deed I still had, the one Mr. Alastair gave me, in exchange for a truce and the immediate release of Celeste's frozen accounts. Quinton, arrogant and absolutely convinced that he had won, agreed instantly to meet me alone in a secluded, abandoned warehouse near the port docks. I arrived alone, the precious deed clutched tightly in my hand. I stepped into the dim, dusty space, my senses on full alert. "Where is Celeste?" I demanded, my voice shaking with feigned panic. Quinton stood there, smiling a chilling, triumphant smile. "Celeste is safe," he said casually. "For now." But then, a shadow separated itself from the wall. Ingrid Sterling stepped forward, her face perfectly calm and professional. Her expensive suit looked terribly out of place in the grime. "You never learned when to stop, Tony," she said, her voice dripping with cold, calculated disappointment. The double cross I had planned for Quinton had instead been completely turned on me. I had played the part of the foolish, defeated man perfectly. I looked panicked and desperate, offering the deed as my complete surrender. But while Quinton and Ingrid thought they had successfully trapped me, I was setting my own snare. I looked past Ingrid to the dark corners of the warehouse. Hidden cameras were indeed rolling, just as Ingrid had set them up to record my supposed confession of guilt. But those were not my cameras. As the two villains started to speak, revealing their terrible crimes aloud, their voices echoing in the huge, empty space, I smiled faintly. I wasn't recording them for later use. Celeste, following my final, desperate command before I left the cabin, had taken over the auction's private live feed once more. I was streaming their conversation live to the handful of major, influential investors who had not yet left the failed auction site. The entire crowd gasped in the tent as they suddenly realized they were hearing an undeniable confession. Quentin finally noticed the tiny, unhidden, flashing red light of a webcam that I hadn't even brought. Quentin's face twisted into an ugly mask of pure rage. He lunged at me with a furious roar. The camera, broadcasting to the few remaining investors, suddenly cut to black. The scene at the stolen properties auction tent exploded into pure pandemonium. Police cruisers and several unmarked cars immediately swarmed the site. They had been tipped off by the investors who had witnessed the shocking live confession. Quentin Vale was quickly dragged away in handcuffs, screaming useless threats and furious denials as the cameras flashed all around him. He was shouting about a setup and about my lies, but no one was listening anymore. The evidence was too strong, and the witnesses were too powerful and well-connected. I watched the arrest on my phone, a look of grim satisfaction settling on my face. But the victory felt incomplete. Ingrid Sterling was nowhere to be found. She had used the precise moment of chaos in the warehouse, when Quentin lunged at me, to easily slip away, disappearing quickly with the stolen millions in cryptocurrency. Celeste, now safe and back at her own terminal, called me right away. Her voice was urgent and serious. "She's coming for you next, Tony. And she's smarter and more dangerous than Quentin ever was." I felt the heavy weight of that truth settle over me. I had taken down the foot soldier, but the Queen was still loose and planning her next attack. Ingrid's counterattack was terrifyingly swift and precise. A fake warrant for my arrest, fabricated using her deep government connections, appeared on the major news networks within the hour. My personal bank accounts were instantly frozen, crippling me financially and stopping me from hiring a lawyer. I had to quickly grab a few essential items and flee my home again. I became a full-fledged fugitive overnight, forced into hiding with the only person I could fully trust, Mr. Alastair, who lived in a small, remote cabin deep in the woods, far from the city. In the dark, dusty solitude of the cabin, I admitted the painful truth to myself. I slumped into an old chair, completely drained and defeated. "I honestly thought revenge would end it all, Mr. Alastair," I confessed. "It only woke the true, far more powerful enemy." I realized that Quentin had been nothing but a stupid puppet, a simple distraction. Ingrid was the real monster, and she was absolutely playing for keeps. My entire personal life was destroyed, and my freedom was now on the line. But I was a Marine's son and a fighter. I knew the only way out of this terrifying situation was to fight my way through. I had to become the hunter once more. The tables had completely turned, the hunter became the hunted, and the entire world was watching my humiliation. Ingrid released carefully altered video footage of our brief encounter in the warehouse. The video, expertly edited by her team, painted me as the true fraud who was threatening her and Quentin. Public opinion quickly turned vicious against me, seeing me as a dangerous, obsessed criminal. The pressure was immense and suffocating. I realized I couldn't fight Ingrid with legal documents or basic cyber warfare. She was too powerful and too protected. I had to outplay her using her own most powerful weapon, public exposure. I learned that Ingrid was hosting an exclusive, high-profile charity gala in the city the very next night. This was going to be her moment of public triumph, her chance to parade her fake innocence to the city's most powerful people. I saw my clear opportunity. I planned to infiltrate the gala and confront her directly on her own stage. I spent the entire next day preparing my careful disguise and memorizing the gala's detailed floor plans. This was no longer about filing a lawsuit, it was about exposing the shocking truth to the people who mattered most, her wealthy and influential contacts. Under a convincing disguise, a rented tuxedo, professional makeup, and a confident, false name I attended the lavish charity gala. The ballroom was packed with the city's elite, all completely fooled by Ingrid's charming but cold facade. The tension crackled fiercely through my veins as I finally locked eyes with Ingrid across the brightly lit ballroom floor. She saw me, and for a fleeting split second, her calm composure wavered. A moment later, Ingrid approached me, feigning a polite, mild interest in the newcomer. We began a slow, tense dance. Our words were like hidden daggers passing between us in the midst of the elegant music. We exchanged chilling threats and veiled insults, our forced smiles never reaching our cold, calculating eyes. Then, Ingrid leaned in very close, her voice a low, poisonous whisper in my ear. "Your mother wasn't innocent either, Tony," she hissed, smiling. "She helped us start it." The shocking realization hit me hard. My carefully constructed mask of composure nearly slipped completely off my face. The depth of the new betrayal was devastating. I quickly left the dance floor and found a quiet, hidden corner, trying desperately to absorb Ingrid's latest, cruel lie. I needed immediate proof to confirm or deny her claim. Celeste, despite being aggressively threatened by Ingrid's crew, managed to send me a single encrypted file before going completely silent again. The file contained incredibly old, hidden documents. They shockingly revealed the full truth of Ingrid's whisper. My mother had, in the very beginning, actually helped Quentin and Ingrid start their entire scheme. She was incredibly naive and blinded by her secret love for Quentin. However, the documents also clearly showed that my mother had quickly realized their true, evil intentions and had desperately tried to stop them. The record strongly hinted that her tragic, accidental death was actually during the chaotic fallout of her brave attempt to expose them. My mind reeled from the flood of information. My mother wasn't just a victim of betrayal, she was a victim of her own courage. The truth simplified my goal, removing the layer of grief and self-pity. My revenge was no longer just for justice, it was for complete redemption, to clear my mother's name and finish the dangerous job she had paid for with her life. "I'll finish what she couldn't," I silently vowed. The game turned deeply cruel and desperate very fast. Celeste was kidnapped by Ingrid's goons. Ingrid's call came immediately after, her voice ice-cold and devoid of any emotion. "I have your friend, Tony. I need the original deed for the land in exchange for her life. Do it now." She gave me exactly 1 hour to comply. I was completely torn between my careful plan and my only true friend. Celeste was the one person who had stood by me and helped me. I absolutely couldn't sacrifice her life for a piece of paper, no matter how valuable it was. I made the heart-wrenching decision, I chose Celeste. I agreed to the trade immediately. I drove to the isolated drop site, the deed clutched tightly in my hand, my heart heavy with loss. I saw Celeste, bruised but miraculously alive, being held roughly by 2 huge bodyguards. I placed the deed carefully on the hood of the car. Ingrid picked it up, her lips curling into a sickening, triumphant sneer. "Checkmate, Tony," she gloated. Before I could even react, Ingrid pulled out a small, military-grade lighter. With a flick of her wrist, the deed burst into flames right before my horrified eyes. My final, most important piece of evidence was completely gone forever. I immediately returned to Mr. Alastair's cabin, feeling the crushing, bitter weight of total defeat. I had sacrificed the deed, and yet, Celeste was still held captive, as Ingrid had lied and taken the evidence. I slumped into the old chair, completely exhausted and rubbing my tired, stinging eyes. I had nothing left in my arsenal. No evidence, no money, no ally, and no land deed. Mr. Alastair saw the absolute despair in my eyes. The kind old man walked over and put a comforting hand on my shoulder. "Sit up, son," he said, his voice surprisingly firm and steady. "Your mother wasn't just clever, she was incredibly cautious." Mr. Alastair walked to an old wooden chest, dug deep under a pile of linens, and pulled out a tightly rolled-up scroll, sealed securely with wax. "The deed you had was the original," he explained softly. "But your mother trusted me with one secret years ago, before Quentin and Ingrid started getting greedy." He handed the scroll to me. It was a hidden, fully notarized copy of the land deed, signed and absolutely legally sound. The final, true weapon still existed. With renewed, surging hope and the authentic deed copy safe in my hands, I went back on the absolute offensive. I scheduled a second, highly visible, auction, this time not for the land itself, but to reveal the complete and final truth. I quickly bought time on an obscure, high-traffic video platform and prepared a devastating live stream. I would use no filters and no edits, just the raw, undeniable truth. I used the remaining secret digital pathway Celeste had built to issue a dramatic, public invitation to everyone, news media, the local police, and most importantly, Ingrid Sterling. The stream was set to start precisely at noon, the exact time of the original failed auction. It was a symbolic reset of the entire conflict. I set up a simple camera in Mr. Alastair's cabin, with a single, harsh lamp illuminating my determined face. This time, there would be no doubt, no fake PR to hide behind, and no escape route. I was putting myself out there completely, betting absolutely everything on the sheer, undeniable power of the truth. I patiently waited for the agonizing minutes to tick down to the climax. The live broadcast started exactly at noon. Thousands of people immediately turned in, investors, journalists, and curious onlookers from all over the world. I started by holding up the original, notarized copy of the deed, proving my family's undeniable ownership. Then, I moved to the main event. I played a stunning, unedited sequence of footage, Ingrid's cold confession. From the warehouse, definitively revealing her as the true mastermind behind the land theft and the massive fraud. But the most devastating clip was a secret recording from years ago, showing Ingrid ordering Quentin to frame me. Public outrage erupted instantly and violently. Ingrid, who was watching the live stream from her hideout, logged into the chat feature, completely unable to resist responding. She actually laughed in the comments section, arrogantly admitting it all. "You really think the truth matters, Tony? I'm still untouchable," she typed. Just as she finished typing that arrogant message, the door of the cabin burst wide open. It wasn't the local police I expected. It was the FBI. A stern, official agent looked right into the camera lens, his voice booming. "It does today, Ingrid. It does today." The long, painful saga of betrayal and revenge was finally coming to its absolute end. Ingrid Sterling was immediately arrested on multiple federal charges. Faced with overwhelming evidence and the prospect of spending the rest of his life in prison, Quentin Vale testified against her, betraying his former partner to save himself. My name was completely and publicly cleared. My reputation was totally restored, and my mother's land was legally returned to the Ward family. I stood in the very middle of the field I had fought so desperately to reclaim. The soil felt different now, heavy with memory. The victory was immense, but it wasn't a feeling of pure triumph, it was a feeling of closure. The fight had cost me so much, but I had successfully done what my mother couldn't. I had exposed the corruption and stopped the greedy, heartless people who had ruined 2 generations of my family. Before I left, I knelt down and planted a single rose in the center of the field, a silent, beautiful tribute to my mother's memory. Weeks later, I was finally sleeping soundly and peacefully in my own bed again, enjoying the quiet peace I hadn't known for over a year. The financial and legal battles were almost completely settled. My mother's land was secure. I woke up gently, not to the violent pounding of a door, but to a faint, deliberate knock at 5 a.m. I got out of bed, my senses on high alert, but I felt a strange sense of calm. I looked out the window. Mr. Alastair's house was dark. The old man wasn't there. I opened the front door slowly. There was a single, flat envelope resting on my porch floor, sealed with a distinctive, bright red wax. I picked it up and broke the seal carefully. Inside, written in a beautiful, chilling cursive, were only 3 words, round 2. I.S. Ingrid Sterling had found one last way to send a message from her high-security prison cell. The threat was terrifyingly clear. I looked directly into the camera lens, my eyes were calm, focused, and utterly unbroken. I smiled faintly, a man fully ready for anything that came next. I whispered, then we begin again. The screen went fade to black. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the playlist now.